Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we're super happy to have you here. And if you've been listening and enjoying for a while, I would be super grateful if you would please take a moment to give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the best and simplest ways to pay it forward and help others find the show so that they too can tap into the powerful perspectives and positive vibrations we are collectively emanating. The other unique and magical way to share this show is by sending any friends you think would benefit from listening to this podcast our Game with the Universe link at positivehead.com/game. Also listed in the show notes, which will serve them up a quote unquote random episode when they click it. Just instruct them before clicking the link to close their eyes for a moment and sincerely ask the universe to cue up the episode that contains the insight and perspectives that they most need to hear at this point in their life journey, and then click to listen to whatever episode is synchronistically served up to them. I have heard time and time again from people about the incredible results they received playing the game. So just tell your friends magical results are guaranteed or their karma back. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share, I'm very excited to have Paul Selig here with me on the show. Paul is a psychic intuitive, teacher, and award-winning author of several channeled books, most recently of which, The Kingdom, which actually completes his Beyond the Known trilogy. Excited to dive in today. Hello, Paul. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. I have long been an admirer of your work, and I know the listeners will enjoy it too. I would like to start with the same cliche opening question I always ask, and it is this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
Napping.
You know, that might be the most, that might be the best question and the closest and dearest to my own heart that I've ever heard. Fair enough. You got 9 floors to go, but I'll let her think about that. So if you would, Paul, give us a little bit of your backstory for those who aren't familiar, whatever feels pertinent to share. Just to give the listeners an idea of, who the heck you are and how you got here.
Well, I mean, this isn't what I expected I'd be doing with my life. I was raised sort of an atheist in New York City, and I was raised to believe that stupid people believed in, spiritual stuff. When I was 25, I hit a wall. I was just out of graduate school at Yale. I was a hard partying playwright. And I hit a real wall. I had a list of all the things that I thought I needed to achieve in my life to make me okay. And I got the whole list and I wasn't okay by any stretch of the imagination. And I actually started praying for the first time in my life. When I really felt backed up against a wall. And I actually got a response, which really kind of floored me. I heard a voice telling me to get my act together and how to do it. And I actually listened and I did what it said. And that was the beginning of a lot of change. And I had an experience a few months later. There was this thing happening that people were calling the harmonic convergence. I heard people were going to be waking up. And I thought, well, if there is a God or something like a God and you ask to be woken up, why would it want to say no? So I just went up to the roof, really with kind of, I suppose, an expectation that something might or would happen. And somebody had given me a crystal and a mantra, and I thought you needed the props to wake up. And I was doing a little mantra, and I had this experience of energy moving through my body and out through the top of my head. And I always have to say, for all I know, I was hyperventilating. I have no idea what really happened, but it was an experience of energy that left me sort of rocking and sort of paralyzed, on this rooftop. And for me, it was something palpable. And I started seeing little lights around people shortly thereafter, like fireflies. And people said, Sounds like it might have been a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. I heard soul awakening. I heard, with the little lights around people, I was hearing brain tumor, detached retina. Yeah, I didn't know what to think. But I knew that there was something going on, and I was being given just enough of a push to help me trust that maybe this was the way for me to go. And that really was for me, it was a life changer, but it happened at a time when everything was changing in my life. My idea of who I was supposed to be was being rocked in every direction and sort of falling away. And it was scary, and exciting, and new and hard. So that was the beginning. I studied a form of energy healing, eventually to get an understanding for what I was starting to experience. I was volunteering at a center for people living with life-challenging illness in New York. By now, I'm like 30, 31. It's the height of the AIDS epidemic. These little pop-ups were showing up to provide services for people who were not being served elsewhere. And I found that if I had my hands on people's bodies, I began to hear things for them. So, my abilities have always been in service to other people. It's not about getting the lucky numbers for myself, but if I have my hand on your chest and I hear the name Arthur, I learn to say, who's Arthur? And you might say, my father, my brother, my lover, my dog, whatever. And as that kept getting sort of proven out, I began to trust this radio station that I was tuning into. And I did a little group that met in my apartment and met for about 18 years, where I would sit in the energy. And I was interested in the energy, not the information, but there was a very potent and palpable energy that would come through when I would do this work that we could all feel. And that was exciting because I could get high in the energy, and I wasn't getting high in anything else anymore. So I had that, and that was exciting. And kept me moving forward. But I had another life, through all of this. I was a college teacher. I taught at NYU for 25 years. I ran a master's program at Goddard College for 18 of those years. And I was kind of doing this work pretty quiet. Eventually, I got a website without my name on it or my photograph. I didn't want people to really know. I wanted to keep my position at NYU. I'd had it forever. And then what happened when I was about 48, which is 11 years ago now, the guys I work with told me that I had to quit smoking. They said, we'd like to continue to work with you, but you have to stop smoking. And I was a 4-pack a day guy. So I
Oh,
knew
wow.
how to stop. Oh yeah, I loved it. I used to channel and smoke out the window in those days. But they
Wow.
said, yeah, we need to stop. And I did, amazingly so. Like that week, I quit. And suddenly my senses just opened up at a whole other level. I mean, it
Wow.
was like suddenly there'd been a real dim filter on whatever my light was, and suddenly it was off, and I was feeling everything and seeing everything. And that's when they started to lecture through me. And all I really knew at the beginning was they were talking more, and I was never all that interested in the content. The group I was sitting with was interested, but I wasn't recording and I wasn't transcribing. And another medium found out that I wasn't recording or transcribing and was mildly outraged. And so the following week, I recorded them and I sat down and I transcribed, and I saw that what had come out was a perfectly formed lecture. And it's actually, I think it's on my website in the archives. It's like the first lecture that I ever posted.
Wow.
But I got kind of addicted to doing it. Every week I wanted to know what they said and if it would come out cleanly. Now, I had been a writer with the worst case of writer's block of anybody I've ever met in my life. It was a source of enormous shame because I was teaching writing. And the idea that something could be spoken through me that didn't require any editing, that was kind of brilliant and perfect, was fascinating to me.
Sure.
And once I became willing to do that, they started dictating the books. And they've done now 9 books that are in print. The 9th just came out. It's The Kingdom. And they're probably about 2/3 of the way through their 10th. And they started that, I think, 4 weeks ago. So the books take days.
Wow.
Usually about 30 days of sessions. Now, the first book took 2.5 weeks. They said it'll take 2 weeks, which is why I agreed to do it. It took 2.5 weeks because I took 2 days off to go teach at NYU. But yeah, and there's no editing. So the books come out fully formed and they're sent to Now the recordings are sent to a transcriptionist, and then the transcriptionist is sent to a proofreader, and then I look at it. But the rule is we don't. I think in any book, maybe like 3 words get changed because I've
Wow.
mispronounced them or stumbled over them, or I pluralized something that didn't need to be pluralized. I mean, it's usually that simple. But that's been the rule from the beginning. It's not my book to go back and fix.
Wow.
And so, the last, I would say, 6 books or so have all been done in front of live audiences. I mean, lately more online, although I did convene a group where I live now on Maui to be present for what turned out to be about 100 pages of the book that they're currently doing, because I miss doing it in front of people. There has to be an active listener. And when I'm with a group of people, the guides will work with the energetic attunements that are the basis of the texts. And then I get to feel that again, because I like to be in the energy and feel the energy. And I can feel it when I'm channeling with people on a Zoom call. But when you're in a room full of people and the whole room lifts, that's kind of wonderful and exciting. So that's the story. And I left my academic life maybe 5, 6 years ago, when that was like pulling teeth, because when you've been in a job for 25 years and you're in your 50s, you don't necessarily want to walk away from your retirement and all that stuff. But I did. And this is what I do now. And I'm still trying to understand it. I'm not an expert in this. I'm a radio. That's how I look at myself. I have this
Wow.
odd skill set. Some people can touch their tongue to their nose and I can channel a book. It's a weird set of coordinates, I suspect, that makes this possible, but it's what I
Wow.
do.
Wow. As someone who just wrote and released my first book, 100 pages or so, little over 3 hours to listen to on audiobook, and the amount of time, energy, editing, it really says something having read some of your material and how just, precise and intelligent and brilliant it is. I mean, to me, I often talk about when I talk about channeling in general, I always say, look, whether or not it's channeled or not, I'm less interested in that in the information that's there. And that sort of speaks for itself. It just so happens some of the most brilliant texts I've ever come across, also the author claims to have channeled it, right? So for me, all signs point to yes. And when you relay something like that, like, hey, I literally am just spitting this out and nothing's being edited. As someone who's been through that process, that is really saying something. Now, it'd be different if I picked up your book and it was a bunch of, it was not written well. It's written brilliantly. So it really is quite the testament to the art form, I would say.
I think it's an art form. I mean, I think there's a craft involved, like anything else, that there's a reason I think I did this for 18 years before they started dictating
Sure.
books through me. I was
Sure.
developed, in a way. But, I was fortunate. The very first publisher that I had, the first editor I had, agreed with me that nothing would be changed. And we wanted this to be the authentic article, even if there were sentences where, the pronouns didn't align, or, that were clunky. The clunky sentences are in there, and the clunkiness is mostly me scrambling to hear the next word. I hear in phrases.
Mm-hmm.
So a book for me, it's kind of like reading a million fortune cookies, one after the other, the phrase, and you don't know. I don't know what the title's going to be. Once I was told the title in advance of the book, because the publisher said, "What's the title going to be?" And I asked, and I got it. But for the most part, chapter headings, content, I don't know any of this stuff until it's coming out of my mouth.
Wow.
And it's always like jumping off of a diving board into a pool and hoping that there's water there. And at this point, I mostly trust that there's water. They haven't not shown up, which used to be my fear. Like, what happens if I show up and they don't show up and there's 100 people waiting,
Yeah,
but
sure.
yeah, it's what it is. I have a friend that says, Paul, I know that you didn't write these books because they're smarter than you are. And I
Right.
appreciate that. I mean, and I've said, no matter how, I don't know, adept I may be with language, I don't think I'm capable of closing my eyes and dictating all these books that don't require editing, and I can leave it at that I can rest in enough.
Yeah, right. Is the process for you, I mean, is it like Well, you just said, I guess, that most all of it is being coming out in front of a live audience. So
Yeah.
it's audio recording. You're really never even sitting down and taking pen to paper or pulling
Not
up
at
a document.
all. I've written introductions to two of the books, and those I actually wrote, and then my name is on that, but no, it's
Hmm.
all spoken,
Hmm.
it's just spoken, 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 spoken.
Is your process, as far as your consciousness and personality, um, what is the experience for you when the guides are coming through?
I mean, it's pretty consistent at this point. It's less herky jerky than it used to be at the beginning. There are videos of me early on where I'm like rocking like I'm at the Wailing Wall,
Hmm.
and I still will do that sometimes when the energy is really high. I'll just move back and forth a bit,
Hmm.
but the process is the same. I hear one phrase repeated, insistently. So it can be, they need to know, or today we are here, and finally I'll give that one phrase voice. And the moment I give that one phrase voice, everything pours out right on top of it.
Wow.
And it doesn't stop until the section is done. And then it'll say, stop now, please, which readers tend to think they're being asked to stop, but that's really the instruction to me that the transmission is ending. I do, before I start, a little prayer of protection that I've been doing since the beginning. And it's not because I'm frightened of anything out there. It just sets a common field that I want to work in. And I used to imagine myself climbing into the back seat of a car and turning the steering wheel over to the guide, which was just a way of getting out of the way. But my experience pretty much is that first phrase that I hear and everything that comes is in some ways an unasked for thought. And it has a different quality than my own thought and a different sort of syntax than my own word choices and my sentence choices would not unfold. I've never said my fellows in my life. My
Right.
fellows and
Your
I.
and your
It's not
cadence
my
is different.
stuff. The cadence is different. Sometimes there's an accent, but really it's just like, I mean, it's kind of like a bowling ball just comes and just sort of moves all the other pins off to the side. They're still there. And I'm in the back saying, hey, wait a minute, I don't trust what you're saying, or hey, wait a minute, can you explain this some more? And mostly they will. Today, I did a channeling session for the newest book with a Zoom group. And the guides told me that I was undermining the text with my question,
Oh,
which
wow.
I've never heard that before. I was rather shaken.
Oh, wow.
But I think what I actually think happened was they actually had a whole thing that they needed to get out, and they used that as the excuse to get it out. Paul,
Hmm.
get out of the way. Here, we're going to go and do it our way,
Gotcha.
and they've come to anticipate my questions, I think, at times now, because in the old days I was known to derail an entire chapter, that was being dictated because I'd object to everything and then say, okay, Paul, we'll deal with you now, and then we'll decide later if this is in the book. There's one book where they spend half a chapter addressing my fear, which wasn't the intended chapter.
Wow.
They were doing a chapter on principles, and I was not trusting any of it. And I kept interrupting, and they said, okay, let's just deal with you for
Wow.
now.
Wow.
And it ended up in the book. And I don't know. So they've gotten smarter since then. I think they manage me fairly
Right.
well.
Right. Right. Wow. So, would you give us a little insight into who the guides are, how they relate to you? I
Yeah,
know.
they're teachers. They call themselves teachers. They've used a name when they said, if you wish to call us something, you may call us Melchizedek, which is an old name.
Hmm.
I actually have to say that I'm cautious around names and the desire that everybody has with the names, because
Sure.
I think it gets very egocentric at a certain
Yeah.
point. And I go on the quality of the information, and the tone of the information. There are people that say, I suspect at least, that they're channeling a high being that's espousing fear and separation. And a high being wouldn't espouse fear and separation. There's no reason for it. That's low level astral stuff. You can tune in at that level if you want to, but the guides that I work with, I trust. They don't tell people what to do. They
Hmm.
don't tell them how they should think or what side they should fall on. They give us real accountability for our choices, and they do it without fear. So the first voice that I heard when I asked, somebody told me that that's who I was working with, and I didn't buy it. And I wish they'd never said the name. But when I was meditating early on, I said, "Who are you?" And the guide called himself the priest. And then I heard the high priest. And then, Melchizedek, if you wish to get into that stuff, was the high priest of Jerusalem. And that was the title, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's a collective. I had a new guide show up. I think it was a new guide recently in a dictation who announced, and it was very female in her way of speaking. And the references were really interesting and very unlike what I'm used to getting. It was about she talked about embroidery and, all of the metaphor was based sort of in home study stuff, whereas
domestic stuff.
Yeah, it was much more domestic, and it was kind of brilliant, and she was extremely brilliant and funny. And I feel it was a female because of the word choice and the descriptors, but I don't know. I don't usually see them when I'm working. I've seen one guide consistently, well, not consistently, 3 times in years. Once when I was under hypnosis and twice in meditations. And he always shows up the same way, and he's pretty amazing. He wears a great big hat, tall hat with like a pancake on top of it, and got a long beard and beautiful, beautiful pale blue eyes. And I've been told when I'm channeling, and it's been, I don't know if it's on film at this point, but it's been happening consistently over the last number of years that my eyes turn bright blue.
Oh, wow.
And I have, I've got dark eyes, and it's not that I'm wearing a blue shirt. People say, I must be wearing a blue shirt. And I wear black all the time because I'm overweight and I think it makes me skinny. It doesn't. That's my vanity kicking in. So, that's that story. So they're teachers and they're here to help. And, they say they've been here a long time, longer than us. And that this is not a new teaching, it's just coming in a way that we can hear it. And I suspect what may be different about some of the teachings that they do is that it comes with an energy that's palpable for most people, even in the reading of the books. Yeah. They say the books are energetic transmissions that work directly with the reader. And that's what people have reported.
Yeah. Well, do you receive guidance for individuals? Like, hey, I'm at Starbucks and all of a sudden they're coming through and I need to speak to this person. Is that kind of thing?
No, I don't. I know people that work that way. And I think on TV shows with mediums, they put somebody in the store and say, oh, go to, that person in front of me on the line has their mother there in spirit, I'm not a spiritual medium. I'm not talking to dead people, but I'm a really good medium for the living, which is a sort of odd ability. When I first started opening up as a clairsentient, I was taking on people's physical stuff. So I'd be on the subway in New York and my left shoulder would hurt and I'd look over to the left and some guy had just gotten on and sat next to me with his shoulder in a cast. So I was picking up a lot of stuff and that was alarming at the beginning. But once I understood that I could do it, it sort of stopped happening. Then it was a skill that was available to me. But I have a practice as a psychic. I don't like the word psychic, but I have a practice, and, what I have I'm a radio, if you think of me, my skill set that way. So when I work with people, if you were to come to me and say, I'm having problems in my relationship and you give me your partner's name, I can tune into your partner and see where they're coming from. And often I'll begin to resemble them as I do so, or quote them. So, and I can help people move that kind of energy, in a session. And the guides will often come through with the lessons of a time. But I don't like doing, precognitive stuff. I'm not a fortune teller. People say, where should I move to? I go, where do you want to go? If you give me 3 different locations you're considering, I can tune into you at all 3 locations and feel how you show up there and how you're supported there or not supported there. And I can do the predictive stuff, but it's just not, it's not what I'm here for. I don't tell people what to do. It's not my job.
Yeah. I think that is wise in a lot of ways because, I always say if someone tells you this is, gives you any sort of intuitive guidance that, oh, this is definitely coming your way, that doesn't resonate as the way things work for me. And I'd be curious your thoughts on this idea of, free will and destiny, how they intermingle. The way I kind of view it, I put it that free will is, or it's destined because it's already happened. Time is an illusion. Every possibility source plays out. Free will is we get to choose which version, and there's many, timelines and potentials from this moment forward.
Mhm.
And so I always say in that way, our life plays out at the corner of free will and destiny. So I'm curious what you think about that perspective.
I don't know what I think about it. I was once speaking at a conference. I was channeling at a conference, and the speaker before me did this whole thing about how there's no such thing as free will. And I was up right after that going, oh my God, what am I going to do? And the guides got up and refuted the last speaker point by point on free will. And I was like, terrific. But they speak about the will of what they call it the small self, which is really just the personality structure. Which is told what to want through the edicts of culture. I should have a great body, have a lot of money, I should have the perfect partner and live in a great place and, work 3 hours, whatever it is, that I think my life should be based on some template of things that, we would aspire to. And then they say there's the divine will or the will of the true self, divine self that knows. They say the small self thinks, the true self knows. And they speak about the alignment of the wills, the two wills, the will of the small self and the higher. And they say when you offer the will at this level, it is actually sort of reclaimed by the higher. They talk about it as a braiding of the will. So I think that we come here with certain things that we've agreed to learn. And I think that this is school. How we learn these things is somewhat up to us, but there may be certain events that we're going to encounter in a life because these are our teachers. And I think this is true individually and collectively. I think the problem with the New Agers can be that everything gets very self-centered. And I don't think that that's the case. There's collective will operating as well. And there's a collective reality that we're operating through that informs our choices and what we think are allowed. So the guides that I work with are working to sort of lift us beyond that collective frame to a level of re-identification with what they call the divine self or the manifestation of the monad, is what they call it some days, in a re-articulated state where we're not sort of tethered to the collective agreements that we were born into. I mean, they say it's pretty much like we're born into a pool where somebody already peed in. It's like it's all just fraught with fear. And this is what we grow up in and what we expect to be there. And we don't know what it's like beyond that because we don't have a frame of reference. And they're giving us a frame of reference. And then they say, which is interesting to me, that your choices are made in agreement to the higher will because that's who you've become. You're not trying to do the right thing. You're knowing the next right thing to do. You're operating from a level of clear cognizance or true knowing, which they say is the divine self operating through you. It's best I get it today.
Yeah, makes sense. You speak a lot in, I want to say it's Alchemy, the book Alchemy, about the upper room and the lower room. And I'd love to, if you would just elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, it's their terminology. I didn't know the upper room was like a biblical thing until after it was, they started using it. I mean, somebody sent me a recording of the great gospel singer Mahalia Jackson singing in the upper room. And I went, whoa, I didn't know about this.
Oh, wow.
But they say, supposedly the upper room is where Jesus brought the disciples to bestow the gifts of the Holy Spirit. I mean, I didn't know this. At the end of the book that preceded the second trilogy, they had all their students cross a doorway. They said, the door is open, come, 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 come. And they started the next book with this idea of the upper room, which turns out where we were being taken, which I didn't realize. So the guides say that we're operating in an octave of vibration, and that everything operates in an octave's tone, vibrational tone and sound. And they say, like any octave, it's comprised of low notes and high notes, but they say any song can be sung in any octave. And what they're doing is they're transposing frequency to play things in what they call the upper room, which they just say is the next octave up from us. It's already there. We're just not tuned into it. So I understand, through my experiences and through the experiences that I've had when they attune people, because they attune their students in the books to work with the energy that they come with. And they say, there's a lot of radio stations that can be played, and we don't know that we're allowed to play them, and we haven't been given the coordinates with which to do so. So what they're doing is they're tuning the radios that we are to broadcast and operate in the upper room, which is the higher octave. And that the radiance of our expression, the vibrational field at that level of tone, calls other things to it through like a chord, which they say is how the world has changed. We stop creating through fear. We stop choosing in fear. We start choosing in accord with our own true knowing, which is not fear-based. If you look at your own life, anytime when you really knew something, like I knew I was in love, I knew I lost the job, I knew she was going to die, whatever that was, more than likely there was no fear in that moment, because the guides say fear and knowing don't exist at the same time. So it's even like if you're given a hard diagnosis, that's not what's scary, it's what's going to happen next. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's my understanding of the octaves and the upper room.
Yeah, no, that definitely shed some light on it. So how often do you tap in? I mean, is it something where you'll be at home alone and it will happen as well? Or is it?
They don't interrupt. I mean, if I ask a question, would this be a good day to do such and such, and I'm speaking to myself, I might get an answer, but I don't like to read for myself. What they're helpful with me personally in doing is not making choices based in fear. And often when I should keep my mouth shut, I'll get counsel on that.
Right.
I'll hear, and then I hear not wise. Like I've said, if I want to cross the street in the middle of traffic, I can. But if I say, is this a good time to cross the street? They may say not wise, which means if you want to go kill yourself, you can, but it's not the wisest, highest choice you can make.
Yeah.
So I channel a lot, and I do, public things a lot. So I do every month, I'm doing a 5-day intensive. I've done this, for the last year. And I do Wednesday nights pretty regularly, an ongoing class. And I'm going to start touring again, I assume, in October, November. And then I'm doing books. So I channeled for half an hour this morning, before a group of people on the next book. And then I've got clients this afternoon, and some of that's psychic, some of that's channeling, and that's how my life looks on a daily basis. But, this is my work, and it's what I show up for. My job is to show up, and I often show up even when I don't want to. The psychic stuff, the readings, I can reschedule those. But if there's a book dictation, I'm there, for, and that's the agreement that I've made.
Yeah. Do you ever, I'm sure you're on quite a few shows like this. Do you ever channel on podcast? Are you open to that?
It's not, well, I'll tell you, I did a book signing once in Asheville years ago, and I was talking and somebody raised their hand and said, are the guides going to come through? And they did. And they said, we are not the entertainment. And that was it. That was all I heard. So they don't really come through on demand. If they come through, if somebody asks me a question that I can't answer, I'll often refer to them, or they'll just override me and they'll say, we would like to answer this. And say, oh, yeah, that's fine, because it's their stuff. But it's, so yes, I do it, but it happens sort of organically in the moment.
I see. One thing I've noticed in my own life is people around me. For example, I have someone very close to me who has just started having her own experiences opening and channeling, and was just not much like yourself. She was not seeking that path for herself,
Yeah.
And so, and it's been a pretty intense experience. Do you, have they spoken to channeling and it becoming more widespread or anything, about that?
No, not really. I mean, they're not great proponents from what I hear of everybody channeling. They're great proponents of everybody moving into their own true knowing, which is their own divine awareness, their own
Right.
inherent awareness of who they are and their true worth. Channeling in its truest sense, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, I'm sure that people
Mhm.
would be happy to disagree. True channeling is taking dictation.
Yeah.
It's rarely for the recipient of the channeling. Any
Mhm.
true channeling, I think, is probably a teaching. That doesn't mean you can't access information in a clairaudient manner. Clairaudience is one of the ways people access information from the spiritual realms. But channeling, I think, is specific, which is why, we don't edit the work. That's how
Mhm.
it comes through. When I'm reading psychically, I'm interpreting. And if the guides want to come in and comment on the interpretation, they can and they will. I think the challenge with people opening up is that they need to have some level of discernment about what they're opening to. Just like, there's a million cable stations now, and
Yep.
not all of them are high quality programming.
Right.
And just because somebody wants to talk to you that doesn't have a body doesn't necessarily mean that they have constructive things to say.
Right.
So I tend to tell people that are opening up, be very cautious around fear, messages that are fear-based or telling you to
Mhm.
be frightened or promoting divisiveness, and also be equally aware of messages that are telling somebody how special they are, because
Mhm.
that tends to be an appeal to the ego, which is sort of
Right.
a way in. And, but I do think it's a skill set that some people have it. I suppose some people can develop it. I do think that I was developed, but I think I was developed in ways that I wasn't even aware of. I was a college teacher, and there was a point, maybe 10 years before I stopped, that I just threw away all my notes. I just didn't want to lecture from notes anymore. And all of a sudden, everything started to flow. And I was learning what it meant to get out of my way,
Mhm.
which has allowed me to open up to the guides at a level that I probably could not have either, because it's about letting go of control. So I think if people have the desire for this, I think that's something to explore. But truthfully, there's nothing glamorous about channeling. If you think of the court stenographer, she's the least
Right.
interesting person in the room. And
Right.
that's really my job, is to take dictation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that that is a really great point and says a lot about obviously that ego piece is always can be such a slippery slope and something that we always have to be aware of, especially if there's anything extraordinary that's happening through us in any way, shape, or form. So I really appreciate that perspective. It makes a lot of sense.
I think that's a stage that everybody goes through. When I first started opening up, I was very excited. I wanted to share it with everybody. And now I rarely offer
Yeah.
unless somebody asks, because honestly, I was once, I was on tour once, and I was in a hotel room. I think I was in the bathroom, and I got a text from a psychic that I respected. And the psychic said out of the blue, "Who's that blonde guy with a beard? Stay away. It's a sociopath." And I went, "Oh my God." For the next 2 years, I didn't talk to any blonde guys with beards, and it was unnecessary. I probably missed a couple of good friends, along the
Right.
way.
Right.
But, it was like it was unasked for at that
Yeah.
moment. And, I do have friends that I know have their eyes out on me on the inner planes and do let me know when there's
Mhm.
something up that I might not need to be aware of, that I might miss. But for the most part, you know, you you get to the point, I think, with this stuff where it becomes a little bit ordinary, and in the best way. And it's part of how I operate now. I don't think of it as extraordinary. I don't think of myself as special. I think that I have a skill set that might be unique, but that doesn't make me more evolved than the person next to me.
Yeah.
I said this in an interview recently, but when I was first starting to teach, I was sent to set up a writing program in high schools in the South Bronx in New York City. And this was back when the South Bronx was a war zone. And the teachers that I met working in those schools were some of the most evolved people I've ever met in my life. And they didn't know what a chakra was. They didn't know what a crystal was. I could have cared less. They
Yeah.
were just in service, and they were doing their job, and they loved those students like I've never seen anybody love. It was
Wow.
humbling, really
Wow.
humbling to be around. And so I think that, it's how we live our lives as much as anything else. It's not what we wear or what our spiritual practice might be that makes the real difference in the world.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well said. Have Have the guides spoken to you at all about, of course, there's some well-known guides. I think of you may or channels. I'm sure you're probably at least familiar with Bashar, and you know, in his case, claiming to channel an actual physical extraterrestrial entity. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, and sort of some of these sorts of things that are, we're seeing a lot more credence and so forth given to, UFOs and whatnot from the government now. And I'm just curious if the guides have spoken at all about any of that sort of stuff, disclosure or
No, they
or
haven't. It's just not their stuff. It's not their
yep,
teaching. It's somebody else's teaching. You
yep,
know, the guys that I work with don't speak to science in a vocabulary that has to do with science. I don't know Bashar's work. I've seen him about 5 minutes of him on YouTube. I thought it was great, but I
mm-hmm,
don't. I actually make it a point not to look at other channels' work. It just keeps it clean for me, and I don't have
makes sense.
opinions. But the guys that I work with say, the language of science, as it is going to be outmoded in the next 50 years. So that's why they use music. And it also may be that like I flunked science, in high school.
Mm,
I don't have the vocabulary for it, but they've done it anyway. I once did a workshop at Esalen. I was there for a month with a group of students in Big Sur, and there was a student in the group who was a physicist, and she was, at string theory, and it was great to have her there. And she was confirming what the guides were speaking about, which I thought was kind of wonderful. But I don't have that information. It's not. I haven't read the books. I don't seek it out. I try to
yeah,
keep it clean.
yeah, yeah. Have they spoken to you or through you in regards to the new world that is unfolding? You said 50
Mm.
years, science is sort of completely turned on its head. Have they given any sort of insight into you know what to expect?
Yeah, I mean, they've been talking about this. They basically they said in a live stream, I think a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, get ready for everything to turn on its head. It's about to turn on its head. And I said, please just don't let me be in New York City when it happens. Because I think they said New York was going to be affected. And I said, I don't want to be here. I was here through 9/11. I was here through the AIDS
Yeah.
epidemic. And I said, let me be someplace pretty, please. And I was in Costa Rica when New York shut down last year, and I never went back. Now I
Wow.
live in Hawaii. So they have spoken about it. They've been speaking about it since the beginning. They said humanity is at a time of reckoning. A reckoning is a facing of oneself and all of one's creations, and everything that's been created in fear needs to be reknown in a higher way.
Mm,
The action of fear is to claim more fear. So they're saying, from what I understand, that we're in a time of deconstruction now. And they talked about this in a book that came out a few years ago called The Book of Truth, where they said basically everything that's been buried is about to be exhumed. And the purpose of the exhumation is to bring it to the light. That's not to make it terrible, to shame it, to stick, throw rocks at it so that nothing gets healed until it's seen. You don't get to sort of pretend. They say if you got a dead body in the basement, eventually it's going to stink up the whole house. So we're in this period of we got a stinky house and we're really experiencing it. And we've had it for a long time, I think, and perhaps been in denial of it. They're saying I can say it. I did a live stream last week, I think, when the new book came out, and it was sort of a free offering for people who pre-ordered the book. And they said in that live stream, and this was a dictation for the next book, that we're in a process that's going to take 4 generations,
wow.
for humanity to really reknow itself in a higher way, and that we're in the period now of deconstruction, and
Wow.
that's going to continue for some time. And it's a time of systems failing, and these are systems that cannot be held anymore at a higher level of vibration because they're so informed by fear, and none of this is graceful and comfortable. And
Yeah.
they do say that we have a choice in how we handle this, and you can ride the wave of change, or you can be pummeled by it. And I think riding the wave of change actually has to do with an understanding that this is opportunity. It's opportunity to re-know. It's opportunity to re-see. because I don't know that we get to go back to what we had. I don't feel that. I've never heard that. This is great change is the time we're in.
Mm. Wow, 4 generations, huh?
Yeah, people don't
That's
like that. I didn't like it either, but
I bet. Yeah.
but that's about, I mean, that's about world change.
Yeah.
That's about no war. That's about moving beyond an agreement to fear and separation at a level that we've been mandating. We're the problem on this planet. Nobody else is. It's us.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're the ones, threatening to blow everybody up.
Yeah.
And the guides have said, if you think about the fact that you use the idea of a bomb to keep you safe, and you understand how ridiculous that is,
Yeah, right.
eventually they're going to go off. That's the purpose of the bomb.
Yeah.
And until you move to a level of consciousness where war isn't present, you're going to claim it. We've had it. We continue to war because we expect it. We've always known ourselves at war.
Yeah.
And it's the level of consciousness that creates war that has to be transformed. And that's what they're working with. Then there's no need. Then it doesn't exist. And all of this stuff they say the only real problem humanity faces is what they call the denial of the divine, which is, they say, the inherent divine that's present in all manifestation. We're so busy refuting that we claim separation. And that's the antidote, is to re-know things as of source. They say there is one note being played in the universe, one note sung that's in manifestation as everything. Everything is an expression of that one note at varying levels of vibration. Some of it can be very low, which is the denial of the divine. They say fear is of God. It just denies it. It refuses it. But even fear can be reknown in a higher way. So I think that this is a hopeful time, but challenging.
Growth isn't necessarily easy, right? So.
No, I don't know who said it was. I mean, you to school, we're here to learn.
Yeah.
We don't always get the lessons that we would choose, but they say fear is a teacher. We've used fear as a teacher. It's not the best teacher we can have, and we want to choose a better one. We can. I mean, we can learn the futility of war by blowing everybody up. Yeah. But there are other ways to learn. We don't have to learn through the acts of destruction that are born in separation and fear. And that includes, greed and supremacy and self-righteousness and all of the masks that fear wears. So,
yeah. Do you, or have they ever spoken to sort of some of the effects of, our growth or ascension, or the veil thinning, and what that looks like or will be?
Yeah, they've talked about it a lot. I mean, in the kingdom, they talk about it. In the book that they're doing now, they just talked about it this morning. But they say, that the filter that we've been operating with has been preclusive of the divine, and our senses in some ways have been party to that. So in this process of realignment, the senses begin to open to receive more information. I mean, inclusive, they say, colors which are beyond the spectrum that we've been able to see thus far. I mean, I've been sober since I was, 25 years old. So my path has not been inclusive of hallucinogens. That's my choice now. I don't think they're addictive. It's just my path is my path, and this is how it's been. And I've heard people say that their experiences with some of the guides' work is comparable to that, what they've had on plant medicine and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that they're taking us to a level of awareness that they say is already present. We're just denying. So they're shifting us in our chemistry and all those things. And so they talk about that, the senses. They talk a lot about how matter is altered through vibration at the level of tone that they're bringing us to. And that's how they say how a world is claimed anew. They say you become the doorway at a certain level of tone or vibration between the octaves. So your very presence is what supports the lifting of what you encounter, because that's the level of tone or oscillation that you've aligned to. And consequently, I guess this is entrainment which is the
Mhm.
word somebody told me that's what it meant, but
Gotcha.
everything's operating in accord. So if you're vibrating a certain level and you can lift what you encounter because you're not denying the divine in what you encounter moves to a level of agreement or vibrational accord to you. And that's
Mm.
how they say a world is made new. And they say that that's actually structural and visible, but I don't know
Mm.
enough about that yet. That's the book they're starting to do now.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a powerful realization that, you know, this it's really saying, what you resist persists, what you accept and,
Yeah,
bring love to, you sort of transform, right?
yeah, I agree.
Wow. So one of the things that I always love to get from guests is, I love a good story, and a story of synchronicity or serendipity or positive paranormal story. I've got to think there's probably some fun story time up your sleeve that you might be willing to share.
There's a lot of it, but I'm living one now.
Yeah,
I'm having
right.
an experience of one right now that I'm kind of surprised by still. As I
Sure.
said, I was in New York. I was living in New York, and I was in Costa Rica when New York shut down. And I didn't know where to go. I knew I couldn't go home. And I had a new apartment that I was supposed to move into. And I mean, everything was crazy. And a friend of mine happened to be on Maui and found me a tiny house to stay in and sent me an itinerary for a flight that I could get. And I ended up on Maui. In spite of myself, I'd been to Hawaii once on a bad blind date and said I would never come back to this state again as long as I could. And but here I was on Maui, and everything, I've never had an experience of feeling as welcomed by a place in my life. And it was, I was living out of a suitcase for 10 months, really. I mean, nothing that I owned. Took 10 months, it took almost 10 months for my dog to get sent to me here. But it was funny. I remember I was doing readings online, and I was reading for this guy. I said, I'm really sorry for the bad reception, but I'm on Maui. He said, well, I'm on Maui. And it turned out he had been one of Ram Dass's caregivers.
Mm.
And I found myself, through a series of strange coincidences as sort of being welcomed into this community of a satsang of people who I think are quite remarkable, who were there, in support of that teacher who I never knew. And I'm having a completely different life than I could have imagined and that I would have
Wow.
chosen for myself. And that's the key. I wouldn't have chosen this because I didn't think it would be on the menu the way it's come. I had my idea of what it should look like and how I would like my life to be.
Mm.
And there are pieces of that that are present here, but I have a new home. I have new community. I'm living a very different life, and I'm actually happier than I've ever been. But what I've stopped doing, I mean, I still wouldn't mind a partner, and I complain about that. But, for the most part, I'm experiencing what happens when you start to get out of the way and you start to allow and
Mhm.
stop telling source what it's supposed to give you and when and how it's supposed to look. And that's new still, and I don't know if it lasts, but I've had a remarkable, remarkable year. And I feel like I'm starting to live these teachings now in a
Mm.
different way as a
Beautiful.
result of it. And maybe it's because I'm not, traveling every month to 3 different cities to do these workshops, which was grueling.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for the work that I did. I think I put my time in, the books got dictated, but it's a different world and I'm having a different experience of myself in it. And for that, I'm mostly grateful all the time. And if anybody knows me or knew me, I'm a cranky curmudgeon, likes to complain. And I do much, much, much less of it than I used to. It's
Mm.
remarkable to me.
Incredible. Yeah, that's inspiring. Well, as we wind down here, Paul, is there anything that comes up for you that, if you could sort of leave anything with the audience today that would be of the most benefit to them, as
Or
you know?
Well, I mean, it's one of the most simple teachings of the guides, but I like it because I can do it. And they say, what you damn, who you damn, damns you back. In other
Mm.
words, what you put in darkness or who you put in darkness calls you to that darkness.
Mm.
And they say, what you bless blesses you in return. And they say a blessing is the acknowledgement of the presence of the divine upon what you see, upon something
Mm.
else. That's it. And, you know, and that's, again, simple law of co-resonance. It's really, really simple. I also like when they tell me and remind me that self-righteousness is always the small self. So when I'm up on my high horse and deciding what other people should think or do, that's
Mm-hmm.
usually my ego, you know,
Mm-hmm.
trying to ride roughshod over something. And that never gets me much except
Mm.
pain. So, you know, so that's enough, I think.
I love that. What you damn, who you damn, damns you back. What you
Yeah.
bless, blesses you back.
Mhm.
Beautiful. Simple and profound. I love it. What is the best way, Paul, for people to connect with you? Obviously, your books, I'm assuming they're all on Amazon, your website. You won't care to share
Yeah,
any of that stuff?
all the booksellers, Barnes and Noble, IndieBound, all that stuff. My website, I think, has links, and my website is just my name. It's paulselig.com, and there is information on the live streaming events and the live events that we have beginning again in October.
Beautiful, beautiful. Final question for you here. My closing cliche question. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Paul Selig?
When do I get to take a nap? That's really where I'm at in napping. I'm tired this week. I just want to take naps. Then what is the meaning of life in 60 seconds? School. I want to say it's school.
Mm,
It's a school. We're here to learn.
yeah.
The lessons aren't always comfortable, but they're all opportunity if we can begin to sort of reframe things in that way. That's the best I can do.
Bless them up, right? Bless them up and get through the class so that you can get to recess. Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom. It has been an honor to connect with you, and I know all of you out there listening as well. I appreciate you always tuning your beautiful brainwaves and immaculate hearts into the show. Till next time, everyone, journey well.